Okay, today's webinar presentation is entitled Invasive Plants, Preventing and Managing the Spread in Vermont's Forest. Our presenter today is Elizabeth Spinney, an invasive plant coordinator with the Department of Forests, Parks, and Recreation. Elizabeth grew up in Down East Maine and came to Vermont after earning her master's degree of science in biology from the University of Southern Maine. She spent 3 years working at a place like Echo Aquarium and Science Center, UVM, and volunteering at the Birds of Vermont Museum. Since the spring of 2014, she's worked for the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation out of Wetland on invasive species control and coordinating volunteer efforts on state lands, primarily on in-state parks. In her new role as the invasive plant coordinator for Forest and Parks out of Essex, she'll have broader responsibilities, but will continue working with volunteers and land managers to help monitor and mitigate the spread of invasive plants throughout the state. When Elizabeth isn't pulling up invasive plants, she can be found gardening, birding, crocheting, wood carving, or exploring Vermont. So welcome, Elizabeth, and with that, I'll go ahead and turn things over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Kate, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me speak today on invasive plant management in our changing forests. And thanks, Kate, for the introduction. I'll get more into about who I am and what I do for the state. But today I will tell you about why invasive plants make bad neighbors and what are some of the resources we have to tackle this issue. If anyone's interested, that opening slide photograph is a black swallowwort. So today I'll focus on two of the many resources that are available to natural resource professionals like you all, but then also landowners and any member of the public that wants to take action to manage invasive plants. And like Kate said, these slides will be available to everyone after the webinar, and as well as the handouts, and I encourage you to download this as well. I've included my entire quick resource guide list as one of the handouts. But I'm just going to focus on these two resources off of that list. The first one is the invasive plant coordinator, the brand new position that was created in Forests and Parks, and that's me. And I can help you find specific resources you need. And my contact information is on this address listed, as well as the end of this presentation. And one of the handouts that you can download is an entire summary of all of the resources that will be listed in this webinar, so don't feel like you have to try to jot them all down. And then as well, we'll be looking at Vermont Invasives, the website, which is a resource clearinghouse for all things invasives in Vermont. So I want to make sure that for my talk today, you understand what I mean when I say invasive species. When I speak about invasive species, I mean a species that is not from here and causes harm. Here could mean country, but it often refers to ecological features like northeastern forests versus northwestern forests in the U.S. It could even mean ponds and lakes from within the same state. And species that are not from here, typically they've not evolved with the rest of the species in that particular ecosystem or food web and can have negative impacts on native species. Also important to note is that not all exotic species are invasive species. For example, our apple trees, I don't think that we would call apple trees invasive even though they originate from Europe and Asia. They have significant economic benefit, cultural benefit, and benefit to our wildlife. By cause harm, I mean harm to something that we value. There are many things that we value in Vermont: our economy, our human health, biodiversity, native species, the environment. These are all things that we value, and they are all impacted in some way by invasive species. So as natural resource professionals, the nature of our work means we almost inherently cross paths with invasive plants. Our awareness of them can oftentimes be more acute to the arrival of new species to Vermont. If we take a moment and look at this figure, this is the invasion curve. starting in the lower left at the point of introduction, moving right to where we might detect a species, but then continuing to the right, we see at what point public awareness typically begins. Comparing to the control options on the vertical, we see that in general terms, when professionals detect a new species, eradication is still feasible. However, if we wait for public awareness to come full ahead, eradication is often not feasible or even possible. And what you're left with are local control and management, and basically just beating back the infestations from things that we value. So for me, this highlights the importance of awareness among professionals and the importance of early detection, which allows for rapid response and actually having eradication possible. If you're interested in learning more, the Agency of Natural Resources maintains a watch list, which are species that are not on our quarantine list but are invasive in places surrounding Vermont. So speaking of the quarantine list, if you aren't aware already, the state of Vermont has a rule that regulates the importation, movement, sale, possession, cultivation, or the distribution of certain plants known to adversely impact the economy, environment, or human health. The Agency of Agriculture maintains this noxious weed list, which are the species that are illegal to buy, sell, or transport. They also actively monitor all certified and uncertified nurseries and growers in Vermont. If you have any questions about the quarantine rule, feel free to contact them at this information provided on the slide. The Agency of Agriculture also maintains the pesticide certification and regulation for Vermont, and questions about those topics can be addressed to the same resource. And if you're having trouble getting a response, feel free to contact me and we can work to find you a more specific contact to answer your question. So I want to highlight again the importance of the work done by Vermont's natural resource professionals. The work that I do on state land and any of us that work within the agency can only go so far. Less than 15% of Vermont is cared for by public servants. And that means that around 80% of Vermont land is privately held. So all of that white on the map. This statistic from this source cited is about 5 years old, and that rate is fluctuating, and I've been told recently that it's about 83% of Vermont land is privately held. And that really does mean that the work that you all do with private landowners and on your own land is critical to making a true and lasting difference in preventing and managing invasive plants in Vermont. So when I talk about the work that we do on state land, this is how we get started with our restoration projects. We utilize an integrated pest management, or IPM. Assessment for us is crucial. So knowing the bigger picture is important when deciding first whether to take action with our limited resources, and then whether what methods will be most effective. Does it make sense to tackle one infestation on a stream bank if upstream there's the source population? You should also assess whether the infestations are near anything of value. So for us within the agency, that's rare, threatened, and endangered species, uninfested forest blocks, critical habitat, and human health. And then creating a management plan based on those factors. So where are our sites? What methods make sense? What are the impacts of the control efforts? The impact of control could potentially be greater than the impact of an invasive plant, especially if you're talking about really intensive management. Unfortunately, there's no single control method that works for each species at every site. Treatment is very much species-specific, it's site-specific, and it's even specific to the time of the year. And like I said, control efforts can sometimes be disruptive, so having a replanting strategy is one way to combat that. and monitoring. So often these plants produce large amounts of seeds and have set up a seed bank, or can even resprout from root fragments, or can get brought back into the environment in some way. So monitoring is critical to conduct to make sure that treatment is effective. And this figure I'm throwing in here so that you have it to reference in the future. It basically summarizes what I was just saying about IPM. So the rightmost circle, starting with towards the top, assess invasive infestation. This is usually where we start with the project and move through finding the right treatment, conducting that treatment, and then monitoring that treatment. But sometimes that treatment doesn't work. So for example, as many of you probably know, just cutting back buckthorn in the winter is pretty futile. It almost invigorates the plant. And it can be a waste of resources, in which case we would end up on that leftmost circle path, having done a treatment that didn't work and needing to find a new treatment to use. And so we might read about how someone has had success where they cut and paint herbicide on the cut surface of buckthorn, and that's effective when we try that again and continue with monitoring. So if you're looking at staying current on treatment methods, here are some Vermont-specific studies that have recently come out. The work done by Brian Colleran after Tropical Storm Irene on Japanese knotweed. His work discusses the rapid response techniques for tackling new infestations of Japanese knotweed. If you cannot access the journal articles, I suggest contacting Brian directly and see if he'll send you a copy. I do also have hard copies of the papers at my office in Essex. And that's his email address highlighted below. But that's also on the summary handout. So now I'll talk more about management and review specifics about what I'm doing and introduce you to some resources on the vtinvasives.org website. So in my position, I work with upland invasive plants. My position at Forests and Parks will last for 3 years, and in that time I will be providing outreach opportunities to community groups and professionals, connecting them with the resources they need to tackle this issue at the local level. And also, I'll be working with the Agency of Natural Resources to tackle this issue across state lands. So a little bit of background. I started this new position at the end of May this year, but before that I worked on an invasive plant strike team of sorts out of Rutland, the Rutland Regional Office for Forests and Parks. Much of this work that was done was management, active management. So over the last 2 seasons, this FPR strike team working in southwestern Vermont has tackled invasive plant management, and that work has protected thousands of acres of intact forests and wetlands and critical habitat across 13 state forests and parks. The work done by the strike team centers on prioritized projects, new infestations, infestations near rare, threatened, or endangered species, or infestations that potentially impact intact, healthy forests. So on days that the strike team isn't actively managing invasive plants on state land, they work with volunteers. And since 2014, over 850 volunteers just in southwestern Vermont have come to state parks and worked with this strike team, logging in over 4,000 hours, learning about invasive plants, but then actually taking part in invasive plant management projects, working with everything from honeysuckle to garlic mustard, and we even had a group that wanted to tackle wild parsnip. And I want to point out that this strike team, both the year that I was there and then this year, was made up of 2 part-time employees for Forests and Parks. And you can see them in the white shirts in that picture at the bottom center. So in my new position as the invasive plant coordinator, I've worked with a large number of partners since the end of May, running informational workshops, helping organize work days, running trainings, collaborating on management projects, and the ones on the screen are just the ones so far, and I really do hope that in my time with the department that we see this list grow. Oh, and I do want to just put a shout out that this position was made possible thanks to a fantastic collaboration between the Agency of Natural Resources, the Nature Conservancy, James Trust, and many other groups. So on the docket for me in 2016, I'll be assisting the Department of Environmental Conservation with managing invasive water chestnut in southern Lake Champlain Valley. In addition, I'll continue offering outreach and support to communities, groups, professionals, and also staff within the Agency of Natural Resources. I'm also running a pilot citizen science project that's utilizing a free mapping resource called iNaturalist. If you're interested in that, let me know, and we can talk about how it might be a useful tool for you. I'm also available anytime to help answer your questions, any questions about invasive plants in Vermont. Since I started in May, I've fielded over 100 public requests and hope to spread the word that I am here as a resource, either with an answer or to help you find an answer. So this is just a quick example of the citizen science project I'm piloting utilizing iNaturalist. And it's just a snapshot of some of the data that we've collected so far with really basic equipment, so cell phones and or cameras. And the nature of the consolidation of the data around Chittenden County is just because I'm based out of Essex Junction, but I really would like to see this spread statewide. And again, if you're interested, please feel free to contact me to learn more. All right, so with that, let's jump over to the website. Give me a moment while I bring us. All right. Looks like we're all looking at the website now. Fantastic. So this is www.vtinvasives.org. And this is our homepage. Across the top are all the tabs that you can use to navigate the website. We have this rotating screen here are all our featured articles, our calls to action. And towards the bottom here, we have our events. So people post, not just us, other folks can post events about not just invasive plants, invasive species. Any kind of event that's being hosted could be posted on the website, as well as the latest news. And this website has been made possible through a partnership with the University of Vermont, the Nature Conservancy, and the State of Vermont Agency of Natural Resources. All right, so let's start with plants. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hover my cursor over the word plants and a drop-down list will appear. It should show management case studies, gallery of invaders, impact of invasives, prevention and management, funding, invasive-free gardening, IMAP invasives, plant quarantine rule, Vermont Invasive Exotic Plant Committee, and resources and links. There's quite a lot of information on this website, and even just within this section, I'm just going to highlight a few. So let's start with the gallery of invaders. All right, so this page is a gallery of invaders. It's organized by common name. It also lists scientific names. It is not an exhaustive list, though we are hoping to grow it, but it does have many of the common culprits. If you're interested in learning more about a particular species, you can simply click on it, and it brings you to another page with more information about that specific species. In the center, all of the things that I'm showing you will be true for each of the species that you click on. So in the center, there'll be a gray box with tabs across the top with brief summaries about each of these topics. So control, photos, description, and threat. If we scroll down towards the bottom on the left, there are two additional buttons. One is fact sheet and one is treatment. Again, for all of the species in the gallery, there's a fact sheet and a treatment sheet specific to that species. So let's look at the fact sheet for Asiatic bittersweet. So you click on that button and it opens a PDF. This is a 2-page document that prints really well, double-sided. And especially if you have landowners or clients or anyone interested in a particular species, this is a great resource to be able to just print off and hand out. At the top, we have Vermont-specific information. At the bottom of the first page, we have information about the species and then how some quick and easy ways to figure out identification. And on the back page, we have information about control. And on the bottom, we have information about planting alternatives. All right, so I just hit back, and we're going to look at the treatment sheet for Asiatic bittersweet. And like I said, again, there's a fact sheet and a treatment sheet for each of the species in the gallery. So if you click on the treatment sheet, it'll again open a PDF, and it gives you specific information for Asiatic bittersweet about habitat, reproductive strategy, and dispersal. Scroll down to the bottom of this first page. We can see across the top here we've got months of the year, and then the gray bars across the top are telling us what the plant is doing during what time of year. So we can see flowering, full leaf out, seed ripening, and how long the fruit remains on the vine. Across the bottom, we can see what types of treatment are effective when. So right below the months of the year, we can see a gray bar that has hand pulling and digging. So for Asiatic bittersweet, we can interpret this to say between April and November, hand pulling and digging is an effective manual treatment for Asiatic bittersweet. If we look down to the bottom, we can see a gray bar that goes all the way across. So effective all months of the year is basal bark herbicide treatment. And if you're wondering specific details about those treatments, if you keep scrolling, the next page details those treatments. Sorry for the pause. I can see how many people are seeing the screen or not, so I'm just waiting. All right. So let's look at another thing under plants. So again, I'm just going to hover my mouse over plants and let the drop-down show. And I'm going to look at case studies. So if you are wondering if anyone has attempted to do something similar or in a similar area of the state in terms of invasives management, this case studies page is a great place to start. People have detailed their methodology, where they've done the work, what they've done the work on. And this is a place on the website that I'm really interested in growing So if you are interested in sharing your story, either your triumphs or even your failures, I think all information is important to share. I would love to work with you to develop a case study and post it on the website. All right, let's also look at, so again, I'm going to plants and letting the drop-down list come. I'm going to click on prevention and management. So this particular section has quite a bit of information. So I'm just going to highlight a few things. So on the left here are all the different pages within this section. So I'm going to click on developing a management plan. So if you have a landowner or a client or yourself are interested in getting started with managing invasives, having a management plan is a great place to start. And this page walks you through the steps of doing that. As well, at the bottom, it has some templates for actually putting together the management plan. Just an example of it. This is a short form. There's a long form version as well.
Elizabeth, this is Kate. As you're showing the management plan there was a question that came in from David asking, is there any funding available for private landowners?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you, David. So there, I'm going to show a section I wasn't planning on showing, but thanks to your question, I will. There's a whole section here on the website called funding. And it's not updated as much as I would like it to be. But again, I just started this position at the end of May, and this is a section of the website I would like to see grow. And this is a great place to start for private landowners. There's some opportunities to find funding to tackle the issue of invasive species. And certainly if anybody else knows of other places, either where they've had success or they've heard of people going, please let me know so I can spread the word. So I'm going to go back to prevention and management and just highlight a couple other things. So there are some best management practices, or BMPs. There's one for road crews, but then there's also one for forestry. And these BMPs were developed by private and public land managers, foresters, loggers, land trust staff, botanists. So just a huge variety of folks that have an interest in having BMPs for forestry. And though the page does say that there are hard copies available, that's not the case at the moment. But all of the BMPs are listed on this page, as well as some strategies for managing invasives. Hopefully that's scrolling all right. All right, and then I'm going to go back to plants and go all the way to the bottom of the drop-down list and look at resources and links. So some of these resources might seem familiar. You might have seen them in print. These are all the digitized versions of those resources. So there's a landowner's guide to invasive plant field assessment. Oh, here you go, David. A landowner's guide to seeking funding from the Natural Resource Conservation Service. Guidelines for site restoration. There's quite a variety of resources that are digitized that you can download. I'm going to scroll down here. And then there are a number of external resources that you can access from this page with different focuses. So here's a group of resources specific to the Northeast. Here are resources that are national. And then planting with alternatives and natives. And then these next two pages aren't super specific to natural resource professionals, but I like to highlight them anyway because it's a great way to stay up on top of what's happening. So there's the news section, so you just click on news. And we do work to, so I help maintain the website, and we do work to frequently update with the newest information that we're finding out there. Either in journal articles or mainstream media, and trying to consolidate it in one place for us to access that information. And there's a variety of us doing that, so it's not just invasive plants. So if invasive pests are your thing, there's plenty of information as well. And then events. So if you have an event that's coming up, or I mean, even if you're giving a talk to a group, this is a great way to publicize that fact. And all events go out in the bi-monthly newsletter for VT Invasives. And so if you're interested in keeping track of that kind of thing, you could also sign up for the newsletter from the homepage. All right, so I'm going to jump back to the presentation. I'm skipping a few slides. That was just in case we couldn't get the website to work. So like I said, I help coordinate the information that's on the website, and right now, thanks to a grant received by the University of Vermont Cooperative Extension, the website is getting an overhaul and an update. So we really would like your feedback. Molly Klepek is leading that initiative to upgrade the website. So if there's something that you particularly enjoy or want to make sure stays on the website, or maybe something you'd like to see that isn't there, or something you'd like to see changed, let Molly or myself know. So before I let you go, I have a few additional resources to let you know about. This one on the screen right now is a great guide for landowners to plant management, and the full version is available on the website that's listed. And again, all of this information is in that summary handout. I also want to point you in the direction of a paper that looked at the impact of invasive plant management on the presence and density of ticks. So finding that management reduces the abundance and infection prevalence. And of course, this is very important to human health because ticks spread Lyme disease. And this is a great resource, especially if you're just starting the conversation in your community about invasive plant management. And again, if you don't have access to the article, I suggest contacting the lead author whose information is listed here. Also, if you do work along wetlands or waters or within the 50-foot buffer, in Vermont, the wetland rule applies. In Section 6 of the rule, it talks about the control of invasive plants. If you are conducting work beyond simply hand pulling or cutting with loppers, so we're talking about chemical treatment or intense mechanical removal, you'll need to submit an allowed use plan to the wetlands program. If you need help with starting your plan, let me know, and I can help you out. And completed plans go to Laura LaPierre in the Department of Environmental Conservation Wetlands Program, and her information is listed. She's told me that applications should have a 1 to 3 week turnaround if you've submitted a complete plan. And it may take longer if they need to write you back for further information. So like I said, Laura's information is listed here. And I've also included the link to the wetlands rule if you're interested in reading the rule in its entirety. And then one last thing before I let you go. I do have a bonus resource for this webinar group. Last month I went to the New York Invasive Species in-service, and they released this online tool to the public. And I want to put a couple of big disclaimers out there. One, this tool was developed in New York, so some of the questions in the tool are New York specific. And two, this is a beta tool, so some of the kinks and tweaks are getting worked out. But importantly, this is an analytical tool to help develop an invasive plant management plan. And its goal is to help natural resource managers to determine if an invasive plant control project is likely to be successful and if it warrants an investment of resources. So I'm interested to see what folks think if you play around with this tool and if it would potentially be useful for us here in Vermont. And so with that, I'd like to say thanks for attending this webinar. Hopefully I've answered some of the questions you came to the table with today, and if not, hopefully I can answer some now, and if not still, feel free to contact me, and I look forward to questions.
Great, thank you so much, Elizabeth. As we wait for questions to roll in, I just going back to the question about resources for private landowners and funding. Do you know anything about the NRCS Technical Assistance Program? Are they still offering technical assistance to landowners looking to manage invasive plants? Is that?
Yeah, I believe so. So I believe in the southern half of the state, your contact would be A.J. Follansbee, and northern part of the state would be Rick Dyer, and both of their contact information should be on the FPR Vermont website.
Okay. Could you just repeat those names one more time for folks who might be interested in contacting them?
So that was A.J. Follansbee and I believe Rick Dyer.
Great. Thank you so much, and thank you also for the tour of VT Invasives. That was developed a little while ago now, but that's really kind of a one-stop shop for folks who have any questions about invasives. And there's, as you saw, there's a ton of information there. So encourage folks, if they have additional questions, to please take some time and dive into that website. As Elizabeth also mentioned, UVM Extension in partnership with Forest Parks and Recreation, as well as folks who deal with aquatics invasives, are in the process of updating the website. So I appreciate you putting out the call for feedback because it's a great opportunity to think about kind of what the future of VT invasive looks like, and it's helpful to hear from professionals out there, what the need is and how this resource can help folks. Elizabeth?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. I just sounds like my audio went out for some reason. Um, there is a question here.
Fantastic.
Let me go ahead and just read it. Apologies for the audio problem. Uh, the question is from Harris, and it says, I have clients in the Champlain Valley whose property is obliviated by buckthorn and honeysuckle and other invasives. They're hesitant to
Mhm.
institute controls because of the cost, not wanting to use pesticides, or both. I noticed that the case study in Charlotte cost $15,000. Even with the cost share program available to landowners, they're not willing to pay that much. Um, any suggestions on how to deal with such a heavy infestation?
Oh dear, that's unfortunate. And I know Charlotte pretty well, and it's the presence of buckthorn and honeysuckle. And what was the other species he listed?
It was buckthorn, honeysuckle, and just other invasives.
And other invasives, yeah. So, even if you put a strong effort into removing it, there's quite a large presence. Um, so, it may be, I hate to say it may be a bit of a losing battle there. Though if you do look at one particular, and I don't think it's listed as a case study on here, and it really should be, the Charlotte Park and Wildlife Refuge have been taking huge strides over the last decade to tackle the problem of invasive buckthorn and honeysuckle on the property, and going from that almost completely um, nothing but buckthorn and honeysuckle understory, and actually seeing success at removing it and getting regeneration of the native plants back. And that in itself is a fantastic case study of, they have 290 acres that they're managing, and it can seem, like he said, like a losing battle, but they are making huge strides to deal with this issue on that property, and it looks like they're winning.
Well, I imagine that that's an issue that a lot of professionals face is, talking to landowners
Mm-hmm.
about how to get started. You had mentioned
Right.
a little bit about the management plans and developing a plan. Any
Mm-hmm.
tips or, suggestions for professionals looking to help landowners get started on managing invasives?
Um, Set reasonable expectations. It can get overwhelming very quickly. So setting goals that are reasonably achieved, and understanding that failure may be part of the equation.
Great. And I imagine too, just, sort of starting off, as you said, with those expectations and setting kind of a reasonable level for the bar so that landowners can know what to expect and know that it's a long-term issue, that it's not something that's going to be dealt with overnight.
Right, exactly. I mean, I've spoken with a landowner in Craftsbury who purchased a property for his retirement and discovered that he had Japanese knotweed on it, and he has been manually tackling that patch of knotweed on his property for 15 years. But he said that this summer it barely came back. So
That's a great point too, Elizabeth, in terms of empowering landowners, and clients in order to become involved in the issue.
mhm.
I think it's if you have an eager landowner or somebody who, wants to, doesn't necessarily have the resources, but wants to address the issue, hand pulling is oftentimes, an effective way to get started. Obviously, probably not the most effective tool for a heavy infestation. But it's a way that landowners can feel empowered and feel like they're actually accomplishing something. Another question in here from Sylvia, again, I think sort of along the same theme. If you have a large property and not enough funding to remove invasives, where do you start?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you. Sylvia?
Yes.
Um, Great. Um, I would say, so like I was talking about, within the Agency of Natural Resources, we have our priority areas. So we focus on rare, threatened, and endangered species, intact forest blocks, and new infestations, and potential impacts to critical habitat. So we have our, our things that indicate priority. So perhaps there are things on the property that the landowner values as well. And you can start by prioritizing those areas and working on the infestations near those things of value, and then moving forward.
Great. Thanks, Elizabeth. Okay, well, I'll just give it another minute and see if any more questions come in. As I was saying before, Elizabeth is a great resource. She's here and she's available right now if you have questions. Or if you, after the end of the webinar this morning, if you think of a question as you're headed out into the woods, you see her contact information up there on the screen. As I said, she's an excellent resource for us in managing and addressing invasive issues throughout the state. So please feel free to contact her if you have any follow-up questions, or if you have a question right now, go ahead and type it into the question box. I realized my audio was cutting in and out there for a little bit, so I'm not sure if folks heard my announcement about the next webinar series, but while we're waiting for any last-minute questions to come in, I'll go ahead and make another plug for it. As you know, the webinar series is going to continue into 2016. But we're going to change things up a little bit after the new year. The webinar will, in January through May, will focus on silviculture and silvics. So we're going to be offering a little mini series on that topic. We're going to be kicking that mini series off in January, the week of January 19th, and the topic is going to be exploring silvicultural strategies for the northern hardwood forest. That webinar is going to be done by Anthony D'Amato, who is with the University of Vermont, and we're excited that he'll be able to join us to talk to us about silvics of the northern hardwood forest. So I will be sending out an email after the new year with registration information and details about that webinar, but I just wanted to let folks know what to expect in the coming year, and we're excited about offering this mini series. So with that, I don't see any additional questions coming in. Just one last call out. If anybody has any questions, go ahead right now and type those into the question box. I do want to thank Elizabeth for her time this morning. As I said, she's a great resource, and we really appreciate her taking the time to share these resources and her knowledge with us. VT Invasives is a great resource, but boy, it is pretty complicated, and things do tend to get buried. So I appreciate her taking the time to kind of walk you through it and show you how to access the depth of technical information that's available on that website. So with that, I guess there's no more questions. Elizabeth, thank you again so much for your time, and I hope everybody has a great day. Happy holidays, and I hope you get out into the woods. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day.